So I went to the hub the other day. And in my mind, I was like, we are perfect for each other.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
He will be my husband.
Like, in love.
Exactly, but I didn't say it out loud because I knew that he knew.
Yeah,
Because
no,
he could,
totally.
like,
Yeah.
we have like a thing, like we are a thing. And then
He
I
knew.
went to the library and I saw him with Caitlin.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Literally, I don't
Doesn't make
understand.
any sense.
We're studying, but
She's the one who reached out to him and was like, we should study,
No,
get
that she's-
straight A's. She doesn't need to study with him.
They only have 4
For
classes
Pete's
together.
sake, can you guys please go somewhere else, please?
When I was in high school, one of the first classes that I took was general science. Anyone ever take general science? You guys take general science? Okay, good. Good thing to know people past high school. And I'll take So I took general science, and my teacher, he was a tall guy, really strong guy. His name was Mr. Saunders. And so Mr. Saunders, it got to this point in our curriculum where we were teaching evolution, and me as a church boy and son of a pastor, I didn't like evolution, all right? I didn't want to hear it. I knew what the Bible taught, right? 14-year-old. And so whenever he started talking about evolution, whenever he started talking about a subject that I personally didn't want to hear, that's when, I'm a musician, so I would start, right? I would start tapping. I mean, I tap on it. You can ask people in the office. I tap on things anyway. But this time I was like, I didn't want to hear you. I did my very best to distract everyone in class. And he would point me out. He would say, Joseph, can you please stop disrupting the class? He would say it all the time. And then there's one time I remember saying, Joseph, why do you keep making noise? And I stood up and I said, Mr. Saunders, I'm going to tell you why I keep making noise. I keep making noise because I don't believe in what you are teaching about. I told him, real bold, 14-year-old, right? Could hardly, tie my shoelaces, but I was bold enough to tell the teacher. I said, I'm going to tell you why. And he said, Joseph, I appreciate you sharing your opinion. However, this is the curriculum, and he just sit down. So I sat down, I'm like, and I kept up. And he said, Joseph, you keep it up one more time. You keep it up. I'm going to call your dad. I said, call him, mister. Call him, mister. You call everybody mister. I go, call him, mister. You don't know my dad. And so at the end of class, he pulled me aside. Class went off. Everyone left. He said, no, come into my office. I went into his office. He came, I didn't even know he had an office. He pulled out his cell phone. His cell phone, I'm like, ooh, shaking in my boots, right? And so he pulled his cell phone, he started scrolling, and then I started to sweat. I was like, whoa. He's scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. He says, oh, there it is. Hi, Reverend Joubert. This is Reverend Saunders. I'm like, whoa, hold up. I've been duped. And I'm looking at him like, wait, Mr. Saunders. He says, yeah, this is Reverend Saunders. And your son is in this class. Yes, he is. And he's been disruptive. I've asked him multiple times. Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, I will see you at the First Congregational Church. Yeah, Wednesday. All right, bye. He says, you're good. Your dad says he's going to talk to me when you get home. I was like, hold on. I thought you were Mr. Saunders from science class. Mr. Saunders, in a matter of seconds, turned into Reverend Saunders, and Reverend Saunders knew my dad. So I knew, knowing my dad, it was a wrap when I got home. So I got home, and he was livid, as you can expect. He says, why is it that a colleague in the ministry has to call me and say that my son who's a preacher's son, is disrupting the class? And I said, hold on, Dad. Hold on. He's Mr. Saunders. I don't know where this Reverend came from. He says, no, he's pastor of this church in Norwalk. I said, first of all, I didn't know he was Reverend Saunders. It's the first thing. I had no clue he was Reverend Saunders, right? He's not wearing a suit or whatever like what you were, right? We grew up old school Baptist, right? He doesn't look like what you look like. He's just a teacher. And you know what else? He's teaching, Dad, you're a pastor, on evolution. Who he's teaching on? He's teaching on evolution. And if he's a pastor, he should believe in creation, that God formed the earth. And that's not what he's teaching. You'd be proud of me, Dad. You'd be proud of me. I'm sticking up for what I believe. You see, I learned there that my dad wasn't mad about my personal beliefs. He wasn't frustrated with those. You know what he was mad about? You know what he was frustrated about? He was mad that I dishonored my teacher. You see, my personal actions looked just like everyone else. The way that I acted. And I started to plead my case. I said, well, hold on, Dad, but don't you understand? I'm a Christian and I'm talking about Christian. No. He said, your actions look like everyone else. You're a Christian, but you look just like everyone. You look like the kid that doesn't talk. You look like the kid that talks back. You look like the kid. You look like everyone else. We live in a society that's made dishonoring authority and leaders the norm. That's where we live. That's if you wanted to put a nutshell in 2019, that's the society that we live. We see that on the news. We see that on social media. We see that. That's the society we live. Our culture teaches us that it's okay. Christians, everyone, it's okay to look just like everyone else. That's what our culture teaches. Our kids learn this. Our young people learn this. Our older people have learned this, right? That's what the culture thinks. But this is what I'm excited about. And this is, if there's anything that you could hold on to, I'm excited that we do have hope. Don't we have church? Don't we have hope? Come on, let's give it up. Don't we have hope, church? This is the exciting thing, and that we're going to see this in verse 24, and there's some passages where Peter talks about. We have hope because Jesus' work on the cross. That's why we have hope. We have hope because Jesus been here, he's done it, and he's succeeded. If we live to choose in that hope will push us to honor in all directions. So we're in this teaching series, and we're trying to learn how to stand firm in our faith, and where I'm picking up is the book of 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter. Now, Peter was a disciple of Jesus, but he started out being a fisherman. That's all he was. He was a fisherman. He was an ordinary guy. And literally, he was so ordinary. Scholars and people that study the Bible, they look at Peter and they say, well, it kind of sounds like Paul because it's such good writing. And Paul's another disciple of Jesus that wrote other books in the Bible. But we're looking at Peter, and this is very well written. And I love how he takes us on this journey. And we're going to start out at the 11th verse. That's where we're going to start out. Now, Peter's writing this from Rome currently. Currently, he's in Rome. And he's writing this book of 1 Peter to primarily, it's a letter written to Christians. So it's primarily, so it applies to everyone. So whether you say, you land different places spiritually, you say, I'm a Christian in this room. You say, I'm not sure. You say, I was told. My parents made me go. Wherever you land spiritually, I promise that there's something for you here today. And so he's writing this, and it's back to church, and this is what he starts. The 11th verse. Dear friends, I warned you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires that wage war against your souls. You guys see that? You see where it says, dear friends? See that? I highlighted that. I love that. Dear friends. This is the NLT New Living Translation. Other translations use other words. It says beloved. And so we tend not to use that word beloved. And when was the last time we said, honey, this is my beloved wife, right? This is my beloved son. We tend not to use that kind of language. But if I could just make it plain, if I could just say like what I feel like Peter's saying, here's what he's saying. Dear people that I really, really care about. Dear people that my soul longs for you. I'm in Rome. And dear people that, so there's a sense of urgency. This is what he says. I warn you. Other translations say, I urge you. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of passion. So I want you to get what Peter's writing. He's taking his pen, and he's got an intense word. He says this, as temporary residents. You see that? Temporary residents and foreigners. For those that call yourselves Christians, for those that say that you follow Jesus, you're just a temporary resident here. For us that said, I follow you, and I believe in your word, Peter's urging us, but we should already know, saying, you're temporary, you're just passing through. Go to the neighbor, go to the person to the left or right, and tell them, I'm just passing through. Come on, wake up authentic. Tap the neighbor to the left, say, I'm just passing through. That's all people that say that they're believers. That's all that's happening. And this is what he says. He says, as you're passing through, as you're going through everything that you see in life, he says this, keep away from worldly desires. Other translations say abstain from these things that wage war against your souls. For followers of Jesus, this place is not our home. And so how do you have hope? He already starts off and says, you have hope because you will not be here forever. So there must be something at the end of the journey. And we can walk with that same hope, knowing that, listen, the trials and the tribulations that you go through, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. There is light, that you see people disagreeing, and we get so frustrated. Why is there pain? Why is there anger in the world? Listen, you're just passing through. That there is this hope that's found in Jesus, that he's able to liberate you from these things. And I love this. He keeps going on. And he gets me to a sticky statement. He says, he talks about abstaining this. Here's my second statement. God's will for us to live honor-filled lives. We see this in verse 12. Verse 12 reads like this. Be careful to live properly among your unbelieving friends. Then even if they excuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. I love that. It brings me to my first practical application point. Stand out from others. Simple. Stand out from others. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of hard-headed, and I found that the simple things are the hardest ones to do. It's the simple ones. I have lots of 100 different points. Stand out. Your life should reflect change. But Peter says, if you're part of these people that I'm talking, if you call yourself followers of Jesus, that your life should stand out. You should abstain when you see others breaking God's moral law. When you see others that aren't living with values, that aren't caring about people, your life should stand out. You see, whenever I think of standing out, I think about talents that I have, that I feel I have. I think I could sing. You guys think I could sing? You can give it up for me singing. I think I could sing a little bit. And so, who taught me how to sing? My mom taught me how to sing. And so when I was a kid, I sang in a small little church youth choir. And I didn't go to any formal training of singing, at least when I was that age. And she taught all of us the same way. And so what she didn't know was she was actually teaching music theory. She didn't know that. She was just saying, this is how the song goes, right? She didn't know that she was teaching ear training. And so I want to teach you guys how she taught me. So I'm going to give you this for free, okay? Usually you have to pay a lot to learn this. But I'm going to teach you guys how I learned how to sing. And I learned that as I was singing, I began to stand out. So I'm going to sing a note, and I want you as a congregation, my friends and people that love God and are listening to me. I don't know if you want to listen, but you're listening. I'm going to teach you to sing. So you ready? So I'm going to sing a note, and you repeat it after me. You guys got that? La, la, la. Oh my gosh, you all should be on the worship team. I want everyone to feel Joubert Authentic Church. Excellent, right? So that's how she taught me. And I began to train my ear. And so I want to sing that one more time. So I'm going to repeat that. Repeat after me. La, 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 la. That didn't sound too good, right? You all were singing the same note. You all were singing as one, and it sounded really good, but my note stood out. It stood out to the point where some laughed, or some said, what is he doing? What is he trying to accomplish? In the same way that my note just stood out, that's how your life should look like in this world. In the same way, the world is singing its own song. The world is singing its own song. The world is saying la. And the world is singing a song of, I feel like I'm only by myself. And I feel like I can't make it. And I feel like this and that and this and that. But the Christians, we should have our own song. For people that are believers, our song should be that I love people in all directions. Our song should be that I see things that maybe feel good to me, but I put it up to the face of God, and if he says it's wrong, I get away from it. That our song has to be different. Or would we be people, and would we be Christians, would we be people that say, I want to live different. I want when people look at me that they say, why is Joe so happy? Why does he look different? Why does he talk different? Is there anyone that wants to feel that? Question I have, does your life stand out? Does your life show honor in every single direction? Can people see your good deeds? Do people know that you go to church? Do people know that you love your church? These are questions that we ask as a lead team, as a pastoral team. I ask myself the same question because it's easy to serve God when we're in this room. It's easy because everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's singing the same song. But when we leave the platform and when we leave PGT, does our life reflect Jesus? We keep going on. It says this in verse 13. Verse 13, he's bringing up this point. He says this, for the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. So Peter is taking this on this journey. He's trying to get us to understand this theme of honor. He says you can't get honor, you can't get the concept until you realize that you're supposed to be different. He's talking to the saints. You can't get this until you realize that your life should reflect different. And then he says this, because you realize that you're just passing through, because you realize that your life should look different, this is what you're supposed to do. For the Lord's sake, verse 13, submit to what? All. For the Lord's sake, submit to all. You know what I love? I was reading this and I didn't see this, right? It doesn't say this. For the Lord's sake, submit to people who do what I want them to do. Notice it doesn't say this. For the Lord's sake, submit to people who are nice to me. For the Lord's sake, submit to people who do what my will is. For the Lord's sake, listen to my boss when he gives me that raise. Notice he says, for the Lord's sake, submit to all. This understanding that honor doesn't happen according to our will. That honor happens in the context of what God has put. And God's put us to be in a situation, and he may have put you in a situation where you're put in a context of honoring and submitting to people that you don't want to. But as we keep going, we see this in verse 14. I love this. He says this. When it says take submit, that Greek text means to be subjected to. Submit, be subjected to. I love this. He keeps going on in verse 14. Or the officials he has appointed, for the king is sent to punish those who do wrong, to honor those who do right. Verse 15. It is God's will. Everybody say God's will. It's God's will. What's the will for his life? What's the will that he wants for you? What's the place that he has you in right now? It's his will, right? Verse 15. That you will live honorable lives. And your honorable life should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations about you. What's the principle? Obey leaders. Obey leaders. Except when commanded to sin. You're supposed to obey leaders except when commanded to sin. This is what followers of Jesus are called to do, whether we agree or whether we're not. You see, remember that story I talked about? My high school teacher, Mr. Saunders? I was completely right in my feelings. I was completely right. But I was still to obey him. And see, Mr. Saunders wasn't wrong for teaching that curriculum. He wasn't wrong. Right? Sometimes we say, oh, no, Mr. Saunders is wrong. He's a Christian. No. He was not wrong. Mr. Saunders in that moment, and what I didn't get when I was a 14-year-old boy, but I understand now, right, is he was submitting to an authority. He was submitting to a curriculum. He was a teacher. That teacher has a principal. That principal has a superintendent. That superintendent, right? Every single place. This is the order that God has us. All of us have authority in our life, and we're supposed to submit to them, whether we like it or not. Plus, I had to honor God anyway. I had to honor my teacher because my dad was going to whoop my butt too. So there's always that, right? There's always that, right? So usually when we don't submit, usually when we don't do right, there's always consequences to our sin. You know, one of the biggest places we dishonor people, I was thinking about this, is in social media. It's I was thinking, what's a place, like, we don't talk about honor a lot. We don't talk about that. What's a place where we dishonor? And so part of my role as worship pastor here is I have 3 responsibilities. The worship team, you see, production, they do a lot, but you tend not to see them. And you have creative. And so I'm always on social media trying to learn, different habits. How do we respond and all those things. I'm always trying to do that. And there's so much on social media that makes you just want to turn the screen off, right? Whether it's a post that you disagree with, whether it's something that you share, right? At times, if you've ever been a keyboard warrior, you ever been a keyboard warrior? Somebody who's just at home and just going at it. I've done it a few times. If you ever see John Henry, that's not me. It's not me. John, right? Like we live in this age where we dishonor so easily. Why do we dishonor? Because we disagree. But can I tell you what Jesus is trying to say? Like, there will be breakthrough in your life when you honor people that you disagree with. Yeah. Breakthrough starts with saying, this is the place that you have me right now. You've got me in this place and it's uncomfortable, and we're going to keep going on. And it literally talks about, it's like God's will. The sticky statement is to live honor-filled lives. And why do we honor authority? Why do we do that? Verse 15 tells us why we do that. It's God's will. It's God's will. How can you honor authority in your life? Everyone think about that. Everyone think about that boss. If you're teenagers, think about that parent. How can you honor in your life? Is it if you're a teenager, is it that you could just do your chores? Is it that you could just listen not back to? If you're an employee, is it that you're the first one that shows up at work? Like how I want to make it as practical for you, because our world tells us it's okay to dishonor, but God's calling us to go up higher. You see, what's interesting about this, as I studied 1 Peter, because we're going through 1 Peter, Peter is writing this in Rome. And so what's so interesting about this is he's sending this letter to Christians that have been persecuted sporadically, right? And he's sending this letter to all of them. And what's so crazy is, remember, the emperor is Nero. Nero is a bad dude. If you Google Nero, you can find all kind of stuff. You can find all kind of stuff about Nero, right? He persecuted Christians. He made this coin, right? That people, he was trying to push his own currency. Nero was a bad, he was not a fun guy. And what's so crazy about this is Peter sends this letter and says, don't be like the world. He writes this letter. He says, be a change agent. He writes this letter. He says, honor. And did you know that at the end of Peter's life, it was Nero that had him killed? Did you know that when it was all over, and Peter was about to see his maker, it was at the hands of Nero? You may be in a situation where it's uncomfortable, but you can be just like Peter. We can look just at this text and be encouraged knowing that joy pushes you out of that. You can be just in a situation. I'm sure Peter didn't know that Nero was going to have him killed, but he knew who his God was. He knew that there was a sense that he was going to live with this hope. Brings me to my second practical application point. Love and honor the authority that you have in your life. Love and honor the authority that you have in this life. We see this different theme. So as we're going through 1 Peter, verse 18 brings up totally different characters per se. He says this, verse 18, Peter writes, you who are slaves must submit to your slave masters with all respect. Do what they tell you to, not only if they're kind and reasonable, but even if they're cruel. And so I always say, like, as someone that's been through America and someone as a black American, whenever I see slaves, I'm like, hold on, that's where I go away from this book. I'm like, I'm not about that, right? I'm not about that. But when I started to study what it was, slavery was completely different than what we've seen in America. So at times, proper exegesis, proper interpretation gets us to this point that we realize that slavery is completely different, right? Slavery in some cases in Greco-Roman times, it was more economically smart to be a slave because you're going to get food, you're going to have housing. So I just wanted to bring that point out as we're going through this text. Slavery is a little different. You guys understand that? So it's a little different than the context that we have. But notice what he says to slaves. Submit to your master with all respect. Submit. It's hard to submit. It's not easy to submit. I hate submission. I hate being wrong. Anyone in the house that hates being wrong? I hate it. I hate it. It just drives me insane. Like, this is because we ain't wrong. All right, everybody just pray for that guy. Just lay hands. Just even now. All right. You know, there was a moment when I first started at Authentic Church where I saw submission take place. We were in this meeting, and there was an old worship pastor that I ended up taking over for. There was a kids director that had moved. All of us were in this meeting. I was a brand new employee. I didn't really know anyone. I just knew that I was moving my family, me, my wife, and my dog. We were moving up to Westchester. I had no clue who anyone was. It's in this meeting, and people started to get pretty passionate. And I want you to know that at this church, we really wrestle down. We want to give God our very best. We want to love in all directions. And we were super, super passionate. And I heard Zach, that was the old worship pastor. He was, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And some people were clapping and some people was good. And then I heard Pastor Jim. And who knows Pastor Jim? He's a pretty pretty strong guy, pretty emotional guy. Actually, we're all pretty emotional except Pastor Dave. He's new, as a joke. He's the the critical thinker in the group, which we love Pastor Dave. But yeah, it was getting real, and I was just sitting there, and people started to raise their voice. And I'm a new employee, and I just sat there and was like, ooh, this is a church that I got myself into. Wow. We didn't do this at Apple. It was like, which color do you want? 16 gigs, 6400. Like, we didn't do that there. And so I was just kind of sitting there like, all right, well, this is a little heated because I'm a pastor's kid. I've seen all kind of stuff. I've seen boards fight. I've seen all kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, I've seen this story, and it doesn't end well. I just need this check, and I need to go home, right? Like, I was sitting there, and something really interesting happened. Pastor Jim, he's that second-tier leadership of our church. Pastor Jim stood up, and he said, Pastor Wayne, I believe in purpose over preference. He brought back a cultural point that we as a church want to grab and have to grab, but we believe in purpose over preference. And this is what he said. He said, I submit to your will as a lead pastor. I submit my passions, my desires to what you feel is best for our church. Did you know that in that moment of his submission, I was blessed? In that moment where Pastor Jim, he was passionate and he felt like he was right and he felt like his decision should have been well, but it was in that moment that he decided to submit that I was blessed. Why was I blessed? Because as a new person who had no clue about this church and had no clue, just knew that he wanted to serve God, Pastor Jim's testimony set the tone for my future honoring. Pastor Jim, by him just sharing how he felt and submitting himself and honoring himself and saying, I won't be a part of the world. I'm going to stand out. I'm going to be different. I'm going to love and honor the people that you gave me. His submission blessed me. Did you know that your submission, wherever it is at work, wherever it is in your life, whatever it is that you want to hold on to, whatever it is that you don't want to let go, did you know if you let go, did you know if you submit, the text literally tells us we honor so our testimony, so that people can see us and see the Jesus in us. We keep going on. I want to read this. I want to read this as Peter finishes this. Verse 21, he says, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering just as Christ suffered. We can submit and we can have honorful lives because Jesus did it. He writes this. This is what God went through for you. Whether you believe it or not, whether you believe and you say I'm a Christian, you need to hear it. This is what Jesus did. He never sinned. No, he never deceived anyone, Peter writes. He did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threatened when he was suffered. He left this in the hands of God, who judges fairly. He personally carried our sins. He carried your sins. He carried my sins. He personally did that in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin, so that you can live, so that you can abstain. He did it so that you could win. By his wounds you are healed. Once you were like sheep who wandered away, but now you've turned to your shepherd, the guardian of your souls. Jesus honored this submission to the Father. And because of him, we have hope that we can make it. You know, there's a story, there's an NFL player. His name is Malcolm Butler. That's him right there. That was in 2014. Malcolm Butler, he's an NFL player. He used to play for the Patriots, on the Titans now. In 2014, that player did one of the best plays in Super Bowl history. 2014, Russell Wilson was the quarterback. Throws the ball to win the game. Malcolm Butler catches the interception. The place goes crazy. The place goes wild. Instantly, almost overnight, he becomes a household name. It was his defensive play. It was his prowess, his intelligence that caught the interception. But you know what? In 2018, that was 2014. In 2018, Malcolm Butler found himself in the Super Bowl again. A place that he understood, a place that he had been there before. He found himself in the Super Bowl, but he found himself on the bench this time. This is a guy that's seen it all. A guy that had won, the guy who was at the highest place in his career. But in 2018, he sat on the bench. He sat there. And when the Patriots scored, he got up and cheered. Whoa! When the Eagles scored, he sat down and was hurting and had pain because he knew he was a defensive corner. He knew he had the ability to win. Did you know that you can go on YouTube and you can see Malcolm Butler crying during the parts of the game with his hands over his face as his team lost? Did you know Malcolm Butler, he never got off the bench that day? This is someone who's seen it all. This is someone who's the best. He never got off the bench. And you know what's interesting? What's interesting is this was a story that the media went crazy because if he had played, maybe they would have won, right? There's all this what ifs. And they asked Malcolm Butler, they asked him, what happened? This is what he said. He said, the coach made a decision not to play me. You have to ask him. The coach, the person who has the authority, the person who I honor their role, he made a decision. You have to ask him. He doesn't even play for the Patriots anymore. He plays for the Titans. And people have asked him, even in 2019, they've asked him. And he has never disrespected his coach. He's never disrespected his coach. It hurt when he was on the bench. He was sad when he was on the bench. He felt like he was losing on the bench. And some of you may be feeling the same thing that Malcolm Butler's feeling in life. Some of you have been saying, you know, I've been sitting here and I want to win. I've been sitting, but that other person got the promotion. I've been sitting here, but I didn't get that raise. I've been sitting here, but my kids won't do right. I've been sitting here, but can I just encourage you that I believe that God was molding his character while he was on the bench. I believe that's while he was sitting there. That's when his passion was rising up. And sometimes when you're on the bench, God wants to mold your character. And he's saying, listen, don't forget the lessons that are here. It's not about the platform. It's not about winning. Don't forget the lessons that are here. Because it's while you're sitting that God will elevate. It's while you're submitting to people who you don't want to. That's when he molds your character. That's when he changes you from the inside out.
Thank you for listening. We'd love for you to join us live at one of our gatherings. We also have life groups that meet all across Westchester so that you can make new friends and grow spiritually. For more information or prayer, please contact us at info@authenticchurch.com. Until next time, live for real.